Welcome to the Industrial Control System Information Sharing and Analysis Center's monthly public briefing. My name is Debbie Wendell, and I will be moderating today's session. I serve as Community Director for the Center and oversee the Center's human-to-human information dissemination mechanisms. Today's briefing, Teaching to Fish, the INTERRUPT Cyber Defense Challenge and the Workforce of Tomorrow, features a panel of distinguished subject matter experts, including Kate Toomey, City Councilor in Worcester, Massachusetts, and Jason Epstein, Chief Information Officer at the Worcester Academy. INTERRUPT Director Marc Blackmer will be facilitating today's discussion. During today's presentation, Marc will take the first few minutes to lay out some background information to frame the issue. Then, each panelist will be introduced and have the opportunity to present their opening remarks. Next, the panel will spend about 35 to 40 minutes for their discussion. Finally, there will be time for questions and answers and open discussion at the end of their presentation. At any point during the call, if you would like to ask a question, you may use the hand raise feature or type your question into the chat box in the GoToWebinar application. When speaking, if you'd please introduce yourself and indicate your industry affiliation. After the meeting, a recording of this session will be available on the Center's website. So now, without any further delay, Marc, over to you for your background presentation.
Hey, Debbie. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. Appreciate your time. So just to give a little background of what got us all here. So in my professional life, I'm in product marketing for a company, well, now part of Cisco Systems, where I focus on industrial control systems and critical infrastructure and cybersecurity within that realm. And part of what I've seen over the years of working in security, traveling quite a bit, there's a great need for skilled professionals in this field. And Cisco not too long ago released a report where they estimate there's a 1 million person deficit, of people with skills that are needed. And so the idea was to come up with something. I'd read about hackathons, about building apps, but thought we needed something like this for cybersecurity. And so one thing, I'm a strong believer in that cybersecurity should be taught K through 12. It should no longer be optional or something you choose in college. But the reality is school systems are heavily burdened. So to get the funding and create curriculum and so on isn't going to happen overnight. So like I mentioned, having read about hackathons and so on, I figured, all right, let's do something similar. And so that's where INTERRUPT came from. And once I started looking for support, I have to say there were a few early adopters to whom I really didn't have to explain this. First of all, I contacted WPI, which for those who aren't familiar is Worcester Polytechnic Institute, very, very esteemed college in Worcester, Mass. And they responded the next day, and they provided all the facilities. But in contacting Kate Toomey, who we'll talk to in a moment, on the City Council, Jason at Worcester Academy, also we had Tracy Novick on our school committee, and Tammy Padre for Claremont Academy. Those are the folks that I would consider the early adopters in how we moved this forward. And so we had the first event just back on the 10th, and it went quite well. So I figured what we do today is kind of talk to some of the folks, Kate and Jason in particular, about their perspectives from an economic development perspective, an education perspective, and I'll throw in some thoughts from the job market because this is a big topic and it touches on all those different areas. So having said that, I'll end my piece for now, and then Debbie, would you mind introducing Kate?
Kate Toomey is in her 5th term as City Councilor in Worcester, Massachusetts, and currently works in the healthcare industry and marketing. She's a former teacher and previously served 3 terms as a member of the Worcester School Committee. In addition, she worked for the City of Boston in the Office of Marketing and Development. As chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Works, where they consider all matters pertaining to streets, water and sewers, sanitation, recycling, snow removal, and the construction of public buildings. She also serves on the Education University Relations Committee, as well as the Youth, Parks, and Recreation Committee. Kate firmly believes that community policing and special efforts to protect the public's safety should be our highest priority. She also considers efforts to promote business expansion within the city limits and initiatives to improve the quality of life to be areas of top concern. She's a graduate of Regis College in Worcester, Massachusetts, and earned graduate credits in public administration from Northeastern University in Boston. Kate is married and the mother of 2 daughters, both in STEM fields, one in engineering and the other in digital media. Her son is a CPA. All of her children graduated from Worcester Public Schools Arts Magnet Program. Mark, back to you.
Great, thanks. So Kate, good morning for me, good afternoon for you. If you wouldn't mind for a couple of minutes, I'd like to get your thoughts. And again, just real quick, like I mentioned, when you and I first spoke, again, number one, it actually on my part didn't take a lot of explaining to get your support. But one of the things that you said to me right on is it quickly dawned on you that this was about economic development. This wasn't just an education event. So could you just, for a moment, just take a couple minutes and give your perspective on it from an economic development perspective?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's funny because with my background being on the school committee and a former teacher, you'd think that the education would be the first thing. But where Worcester right now is working to recreate itself, and creating new ways of creating business, we're not the manufacturing mecca that we were, in the last century. It just hit me. It was like, this is a wonderful addition to, we've got biomed, we have robotics that's burgeoning, we have digital gaming. We're a center for that as well, Mass Digi. And this was just another tool for us to put into the mix to create another opportunity for business growth and development here in the city. We have infrastructure, we have intellectual capital, and this is just one more tool that we can work on and provide opportunities for folks to create their own business here too.
Great, thanks. And we'll most definitely come back to that. And then Debbie, so would you mind also to then introducing Jason?
Jason Epstein, Chief Information Officer at Worcester Academy, is a 20-year educator who has taught at every grade level during his career. In addition to being in the classroom, Jason has been a technology administrator for 11 years. With his experience in the classroom, coupled with time spent in school administration, Jason brings a unique perspective on the blending of education and technology. For the past 4 years, Jason has been the CIO at Worcester and has sat on the Massachusetts Educational Technology Administrators Association Board for the past year. Jason is a STEM certified teacher from the Krista McAuliffe Center at Framingham State. He has a double bachelor's degree from UCLA and a master's degree in education from National University. Jason lives in Worcester with his lovely wife, Jean, their beautiful daughter, Amelie, and their cuddly little dog, Miles. Mark, back to you.
Thanks. So good morning or good afternoon, Jason. I find it just kind of ironic that I'm in your home neighborhood while you're sitting in my home neighborhood.
Very true.
That's how it works. So, Jason, could you mind talking a little bit about the computer science program at Worcester Academy? We'll get into, there's a couple specific things that you and I have talked about. But yeah, could you just talk about it a little bit? I know too, one of the things that you and I have talked about too that I think would be beneficial for everybody here when we talk about the interest is just the growth that you've even seen in the program at Worcester Academy.
Sure. So Worcester Academy has had some iteration of computer science for a number of years. It's come and gone. This year we decided to really put some effort into doing it and found ourselves a teacher who has a degree in computer science along with a degree in education and certified teaching. And this year we offered just a couple of elective classes to kind of gauge the temperature. And we participated in the Hour of Code activity through code.org as well. Got a lot of great responses. Survey feedback was phenomenal. So this year, well, for next year, we had decided we reopened up AP Computer Science and got 50-something kids to sign up for it. This is a growth of the 7 kids that took it as an elective this year. So exponential growth. And our next steps are to see what are the logical next steps. We're giving them a foundational class in computer science, but then there comes the interest. Along with that, we're starting to recognize the fact that having an understanding of computer science, cybersecurity, networking, all the different aspects that make computers quote-unquote go, will give anybody a leg up pretty much in any profession they enter, because they'll know what their tools are capable of doing, as well as how to do their specific jobs. So I think all in all, we're seeing huge growth, and it's becoming a win-win for both the students and future employers.
Well, you know, there's one thing that really struck me, you know, about the students from Worcester Academy that came, with all the students. So I should say, you know, we had great representation, I think, from across the city. So we had, by far, I think there's, who actually made it, there were 7 kids from Worcester Academy. I know we had Claremont Academy there, Worcester Tech, Abby Kelly Foster, which is actually a middle school, and we had a home student who came down an hour and a half from New Hampshire, and then Bancroft School as well. And so it struck me is, so for instance, the young woman from New Hampshire sent an email, said she heard about it. This was for Worcester kids, but could she come anyway? She was interested in thinking, you know, what teenager is going to drive an hour and a half for a whole Saturday, you know, to do this? And I thought that with the kids. So I'm curious, Jason, from your perspective, I know what I was like at that age, and I wasn't going to spend Saturday, you know, and it turned out to be a beautiful day. You know, so what was it that interested the kids, that brought them there? Can you share a little?
In talking with them, I think primarily it was a chance to kind of see a side of things that they're normally not privy to, or a side that interested them, but there was no real availability academically to grow that without going to hunt on their own. This was a chance to have like-minded teenagers and professionals in the field really at their disposal. And I think the format of Interrupt really led to its success. But I know the kids really liked the fact that everybody was very approachable and that the subject matter really engaged them. It was for them how their daily life works. It's not just a tool for them. Like myself, I come to work, I work on computers, I go home and interact with my family, but some of these kids spend quite a bit of time online. They're doing their schoolwork online, they're talking with friends all over the globe. So to have an understanding of how all this connects and how it all works, I think was a huge draw for them.
No, great, great. And you know, so one thing that I was struck by or curious that I'd like to get both your opinions on, and Kate, I'll start with you in a moment, is, you know, we were talking about, you know, how do you, all right, so you guys were a couple of the early adopters, like I said, so very easy for me to get you guys on board. It, you know, made sense, but, you know, you have to still, to get others interested and supportive, you know, to get sponsors on board. Actually, the sponsors were all over it as well, but, you know, in pitching the value, so Kate, let me go back to you. There's something you talked about, so the STEM current that runs through your family. You know, you'd mentioned that, but, you know, when you talk to, and I say this too because we have others on the line who I know want to do this in their region as well. So when you're approaching a city councilor like yourself, or, you know, someone else within city government, you know, what is a political body, a governing body, going to see as value for the city?
Well, obviously, I mean, you know, business development in and of itself, and creating you know, a broader tax base and building the city is paramount, number one. And so what we need to do as a city to foster this is to support the startup process. And about 2 years ago, we began the Worcester Business Resource Alliance to help business and their efforts grow. And I mean, we've got all the pieces in play here. We advocate for workforce training funds, and we've been awarded manufacturing consortium grants, and we actually help businesses grow to the next level. So we actually help them with all the government paperwork and administering and final reporting requirements. So we're very fortunate that we have institutional partners here in the city with the colleges, which have already created a critical mass of folks downtown. Quinsigamond Community College is opening in the old Telegram building, along with some incubation. We have some things already put in place in terms of incubator and creative spaces here. Art of Science and Learning in Worcester, which is one of the newest ones, and including the arts. That's really exciting. We have the Mass Biomed initiatives, Mass Digi, as I mentioned before, with Becker College. Running Start is a co-working space and startup incubator, and that's actually at Gateway Park. Technocopia is another program that's out there, and the Business Incubator, which is what I have talked about before, which is going in with Quinsig in the new Telegram building. So that's going to be helping. So we're trying to help pull all the pieces together and make it easy for people to come in here and with their ideas and foster innovation and collaboration.
So let me ask you this then, too, along those lines. This is kind of almost more from a personal understanding. But so as we go forward with Interrupt, there'll be the next one in January. So again, for myself and for those who want to do this in their own locales, how can an event like this tie into those spaces? So we have, the new incubator. I was very excited to see that. These other places like Running Start that you mentioned, and several others that are now cropping up. So from you mentioned pulling all the pieces together. So you see it for me and those others that want to put on these events, how do we tie into that? How do we bring value to the city through this program and somehow integrate into those forays, if you will, into the business environment?
Well, I think having students that are involved in this program working with some of those folks in internships, I think is critically important. I think that the primary program that we have already in place is the School Career Connecting Activities Program through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and working with the colleges and the businesses collaboratively. I think we can continue to pull people together.
Sure. Okay, great. And Jason, too, I know you had said with setting up the CS program at Worcester Academy, you had to go and pitch it. You also said it was pretty much a no-brainer. So it wasn't, there wasn't much debate, if any. But that, I think that's important as well. So from an educational perspective, well, even just the value. So how was it? What was your approach to it that helped make it a no-brainer?
Well, I think there were several factors at play here. The first one is that we are a one-to-one laptop school, so our accessibility was not going to be a factor. But also just really anytime you read anything related to education, it always comes back to technology, computers, computer science. And so when I was able to show the connections that it was going to have to math, sciences, even the humanities to some extent, it really seemed to fit into the pedagogical direction of the school. And one thing we've been hearing from our graduates for years now is their preparedness technologically when they move on to higher ed. And so this was just another way to continue to bolster that reputation and to continue to really be graduating high-level, high-functioning academics in a plethora of areas.
Right. I think, obviously I'm sold. But one of the things I was thinking now, if you can expand on it, so, as we chatted for a little while yesterday, and I was taking all these notes, and if anyone's ever seen my handwriting, if it weren't for the medical school part, it looks like I should have been a doctor. but you had mentioned something too about skills, and like I said, I can barely read my notes, but I like the term. You're talking about the need to. The folks were too focused on the bells and whistles, and in developing these skills. So I don't know if you remember making that comment.
I'm sure I made it, but with regards to skills, for a while it was about, can kids format things right? Can they make them look pretty? Can we churn out desktop published, beautiful pieces? But more now we're talking about the fact that students have the ability, when they start learning these other skills, to translate that problem solving to any number of areas. To take a problem, to parse it out, and to linearly reconstruct it in order to find a solution is the epitome of what computer science does. It's thinking about things in, for lack of better terms, ones and zeros. And so to be able to look at different problems, deconstruct and reconstruct, is a translatable skill. I don't care what area of study you go into. But then to have the ability to say, on a cutting edge level, I might be able to make my computer do X, or nobody's thought of this in this area and I can try and do Y. It opens up a whole world of accessibility that was really left to the computer engineers and scientists, and it's really becoming demystified.
Well, I think that's an important point. In the creative thinking and the critical thinking. As we've talked about, I'm a musician. My background years ago, when I lived here in the Bay Area, I was in bands, and most of us couldn't parlay that into a day job. So but what had happened, I was surprised how many of us that I knew from that world went into the IT world, and how much of creativity there actually is, because I think there tends to be this view, if you're on the outside of technology, there's a view that it's very rigid, that it's very stark and planned, and there's no room for creativity. And so now I have a few questions for both Jason and you, Kate, but feel free either one to jump in. We talk a lot about STEM, but now I'm hearing a lot more about STEAM. So with arts in there, and I know both of you are lovers of the arts, if not practitioners of the arts. So, what are we seeing there? I mean, even, I guess, me from a musical background, I'm trying to think, okay, where does the art perspective fit into STEM?
Kate mentioned the art of science learning. I'm actually one of the fellows in that program, so participating right here in Worcester. And I think some...
Oh. Jason, are you there?
Creative lens. It broadens your perspective. It broadens your insight into just about anything. If you couple that, if you read Daniel Pink's book, A Whole New Mind, if you, there was an article that came out fairly recently that talked about the connections between jazz and modern day innovation and thinking. And it all talks about the ability to improvise. It talks about the ability to see things out of their siloed nature, and in essence then grow what you're doing in ways never before thought of. So I think that creativity just continues to expand the bubble of inclusivity to these different topics.
Right. It's the arts really do enhance creative, critical thinking, and as I mentioned, was mentioned in my bio, my kids all attended the Arts Magnet program through from pre-K through high school, and each one was in a different art. My oldest was in music, my middle was in studio art, and my youngest was in theater. And specifically, music is another math, essentially, and so it really does help round out this, the way you think about things. And I think, we've got to make people realize that creativity crosses into almost every, mode of work or thought process out there. And you have to recognize that. WPI has really added, both two of my kids went to WPI, and WPI has added, a number of arts and classes, different types of arts, recognizing that. You've got to create a different type of thought process and be more creative, and that helps when you collaborate, too, with other folks to think how to solve some issues and problems. So I think it's a big plus.
Well,
People don't want to. There are some people that still think that the arts have no place in STEM, and I have to disagree completely. From what I've seen of many of my kids' classmates, many of them went into were doctors or scientists, research scientists, things like that too. So as well as engineering.
Interesting. Well, I think that touches on something. So again, for those on the phone who weren't at Interrupt, one of the things that we did was to have a panel. So 3 folks from Akamai came out and spoke to the kids about their roles in incident response and vulnerability research and defending from external threats. And what struck me was not one of them had a computer science major. Catherine, who was there, I think what did she have, a double major in chemical engineering and philosophy. So that idea that this is about problem solving. They talked about that as well, where you're looking at those companies such as in Akamai, even some of the things, you look at what Google does and some of the ones that are really, really innovating, they're creating the standards as they go. So as they pointed out in the panel, you can't take this in college. There isn't a course or a book you can read because we're building it now, we're inventing it now. So it comes into those, being able to rationalize problems, to think creatively, to go, why don't we do it this way versus the way that we've always done it. And I think that was one thing that I thought was important for the kids to hear, is that there's not one path. And so I guess that touches on something else that the 3 of us have spoken about, is also this idea that of the computer nerd, that you've got some guy that lives in his mother's basement with this wall of monitors around him, just sucking down cans of Coke all day long. So that's certainly not what the industry is. There are some of those people, but there's that variety there. So I think Akamai did a good job in helping to show that. So let me ask you there too. I mean, for Kate, take your daughter's role within robotics. And has she ever seen? I mean, when you're looking at robotics, I'm curious, what other fields or what other disciplines she or her teammates, when she's working these programs, draw from. Do you have any insight into that?
Well, I know, from her experience, from the arts, I think she was able to bring in a visual perspective that helped with the creative problem solving. So the other thing that was really exciting was that she got me excited about it, and about the first robotics. She's very, very involved with mentoring and also the organization of the competitions. And so I guess, I don't know really about a lot of her friends where they came about that from, but I know that that's what she's brought to it. And with that, it's expanded her horizons. She's doing some work on with the Telegram, with the online programs that they have, and I think it's really opened her for a greater opportunity. It's not just one. It doesn't bring you down one path, I guess. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Sure. Well, there's some too. So that I thought, and Jason, I'd like to get your perspective on this. Yeah, there was. We were going through some of the exercises, and there was a young lady from Worcester Academy that I remember we were talking about firewalls, and like a lot of the kids that were there, she didn't have a computer background, technology background, and when we discussed it, she realized, when I was talking about behaviors of blocking traffic, excuse me, that she understood what some of the issues could be. Well, if you're doing that too much, wouldn't this problem happen? Which was basically, she described a denial of service attack. And then we get to the next phase, and when we're talking about the shortcomings of firewalls, basically the next logical jump was was defense in depth. Again, she didn't know the technical terms, but she had the thought process. And what I thought was interesting is you and I were speaking at one point, and you mentioned her and said, yeah, she's shy, which I never would have believed, even when I told some of the guys that were helping out that she was shy. No one, they kept that one, because she was so engaged and she was so vocal. So, what do you think, I think that's one of the things that's important, is to get the kids fired up. So what do you think it was that worked for her? How do we parlay that experience into getting other kids as involved and as engaged as she was, and a lot of the other kids were as well?
As I think with any of this, it's about community, and it's about a feeling of belonging, a feeling of acceptance, a feeling of being able to enter without previous knowledge. That's a huge one for so many of these kids. When I put out the email and said no experience or knowledge necessary, that's when the emails started popping up saying, I want to come. It's the fear of them not knowing.
I think that this is Kate, I think you make a very, very good point, Jason, and that a lot of people just close themselves off thinking that they're not geeky enough, they're not expert enough, or they're not good enough in math or whatever, and so they put up their own firewall, to this type of thing. And the reality of it is that if you can engage people, if you can explain it in such a way that it's visual for them to comprehend, and ergo, the robotics, the first robotics program, my gosh, it's a sport. It's a whole nother sport, watching that competition. It really engages the kids and gets them excited about that type of a thing, that, wow, I can do that. And especially for young women. I think that we still have these days some societal roadblocks. And, as Mark, you mentioned, the guy in the basement. And we don't often see young women in these roles, and I think it was great to see that happening the other day. So during the challenge, that was wonderful.
Something else just to add on to that, and I agree with you about the part of the role of women, was the fact that they're teenagers. So to have the social aspects and to feel like they have a group. If we looked at the kids who came to Interrupt, they were about as diverse as they came. And I think that's becoming more indicative of this field, is that it's no longer a stereotype. It's very old school Breakfast Club.
Right.
You had all these different types in there with a commonality. And they all embody different parts of each other, and I think these kids started to realize that. And I think that was a huge reason for the success, was the fact that it didn't matter who you were, what you were, or how you identified. You could come there and there was no judgment.
Well, the no judgment part, and what you were talking about, Kate, too, the no experience. And when I first came up with the concept, a few of my buddies, tech buddies and I are sitting around, and we were going to, we had these visions of this crazy network we were going to build with honey nets and do all this crazy stuff. And that quickly, reality stepped in, and we didn't do that. But I remember, actually when this used to be called the cyber defense competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I chucked that word for challenge because, yeah, the idea that, well, oh, geez, if it's a competition, I don't have the skills. I'm not going to do this. I'll get crushed, and it'll be embarrassing, and it won't be fun. Or so we changed it to to be a challenge. It's more about challenging yourself. And I think one of the things that dawned on me is what in the real world, there's so much talk about technology, but technology to me is actually secondary. It's the idea that one of the exercises we went through, is around ethical judgments and how do you, things aren't so 1 and 0 in the operation of the day-to-day. And that was one of the big things that I was trying to accomplish here, was to get the kids to feel comfortable, that there would be no judgment, that this was going to be something to learn, but you also have to work as a team. And to help each other out, and I really didn't want it to turn into an individualistic kind of approach where there was a winner, because if you have a winner, there's got to be a loser, and that's not what the point of that was. With one of the approaches too, I mean, what we're trying to get across, and I'm curious to have your perspective. I don't think, Kate, I don't think you saw this, but Jason, you're in the room. Do you remember the routing exercise?
Oh, yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind, could you describe it for those who are listening in a bit?
Sure. Marc did a great simulation, and that found a bunch of boxes that nested one inside the other and passed them out. So we started with a shoebox with stuff in it, and we assumed they were shoes. And he talked about when, we ordered that online, what happens. And so he took us through kind of an Amazon or a Zappos type purchase. And, a box went into a box and into another box, and then out of a box into another box, and then across this, and a long chirp here, and then out of the box and into a box. And basically then made the analogy right back to when information gets sent, and that it goes in and out of hardware, in and out of routing stations, and you could definitely see the eyes light up, like the light bulbs went on, they got it. And all of a sudden, that was a game changer, because all of a sudden it was no longer something that was theoretical to them, it was tangible. And I think the more of these things that we can make tangible, the more approachable, the more palatable the information is going to be.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think, well, that was just it. And so for those that are listening, the assumption was made that there were shoes in the shoebox. And so basically it was all packet encapsulation and routing and how it works. We had them open the box, and it was a bunch of those snorty, squishy pigs. So, ta-da, you just got hacked. But, yeah, thinking about the different layers. But, yeah, it was exciting to see the kids, click, like you said, going, oh, okay, I got it. I've taken this technical thing. Now I get it, because now it's shoes. Who doesn't get shoes or order things from Amazon? So let me, if we can go back to community, and I'd be interested to have both your perspectives, because obviously, Kate, you being on the school committee and working with kids, and Jason, you're around them every day. It seems to me, from when we were kids, there's been a shift, I think, and for you guys to expand on this, but where it used to be rote memorization, and really driven that this is the way you do it. I don't think kids really learn that way. I didn't like it, probably why I didn't do so well in high school. But what are you seeing with them in terms of community? Because I think that is a big component as well. So how is it that these kids are thinking today that is different than we were in terms of community and how they learn?
I think that we're recognizing that people don't learn in silos. They don't work in silos. They don't grow, individually. They help each other grow. And I think that there's a lot of collaborative learning in the classroom, and working in groups. And I think that that's a big change from I remember, being in school and we were kind of self-motivated with I don't know if anyone remembers that's how old I am, the SRA reading program with the headphones.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that, that's a big change that we've had. And, Jason, you're in the system now. I mean, my kids are old. My youngest is 24, so they've been out for a little while. But, you're in there right now. So is that your thought too, or?
Yeah. I'm trying to think how to word this. I see it as it's an evolutionary process, but I think when it comes to community, the more what's the word? Collaboration. Everybody looks toward collaboration. So no more is it put your headphones on and hear the book in a pod, but it's let's all sit around and look at the same thing and each put our hand in it and manipulate it collaboratively. So that's
right, and that's also what is happening here in Worcester, for development too. People working together. We've got the chamber, we've got businesses, we have, other government agencies, we've got nonprofits, all working together to grow the community and the economy. And just as an example, with community, Worcester experienced a greater population growth than Boston in the past decade, and our employment increased twice that of the state. We're competing with Boston and Cambridge, but our costs for real estate's lower here. Costs from working in Boston, the cost of living is phenomenal. We're accessible, and our workforce here in Worcester is young and educated. As I said earlier on in the discussion, that we have the intellectual capital and the infrastructure, and so we also have, our innovation economy because of all of that collaboration. The county's manufacturing grew, 2.5 times that of Boston. So, I think by collaborating, we have manufacturing, education, healthcare, professional, scientific, and technical. And I think that by those industries collaborating together, helps to grow themselves and complementary businesses too. And then I think as a city, as a community, I think that we need to continue to provide support for businesses as these kids grow and get through school and want to come out starting their own business. We need to provide a lot of support for them.
Just to piggyback on that, I think, Kate, you speak of something that our students are seeing here. Being a school in Worcester, being involved in the city, we are seeing those collaborations. And the students and the teachers who are like use that as a model. As these are skills, these are inherent skills that are going to be needed. It's if you go into the medical field, in essence, you're going to have to deal with technology. If you go into technology field, you're going to have to be able to talk with people. No more is it someone in the basement. Everything's interactive, and and so these collaborations, being modeled by community leaders, being modeled by community professionals, does trickle down into the education system. And I think in essence not only is helping to guide education in that way, but is giving students a level of comfort knowing that they're part of the system already. They're on the in-group because they're simply participating.
Right.
Well, Kate, if I can shift it a little bit, so you're at an interesting intersection. So there is, so I've talked about, so obviously we're being hosted here by the ICS ISAC, so it's all about industrial control systems, knowledge sharing, and cybersecurity within critical infrastructure. And then, in my day job too, we talk a lot about the Internet of Things. Cisco's a big, we're doing a lot in that space and securing it. So what we're finding, big concern of when we in the ISAC are talking and throughout the industry is around the physical threats now that the cybersecurity issues can cause. You hear years ago there was a disgruntled sanitation worker in Australia, worked in one of the control rooms. He got fired and remotely literally opened the floodgates of raw sewage into the water supply. We hear now as things become more connected. I'm interested, in your perspective, being within city government, how much, these issues are starting to bubble up. I'm curious to know how much you're hearing about those things and what the level of discussion is. And then even too, as a tangent, what your daughter's teaching on the robotics side, because again, those of us that like to sit around and come up with all sorts of scenarios of what we can break and take over remotely, I'm curious to know how far that thought process is propagated out of those of us who do it for a living. Has it reached the city governments yet, or can you offer some perspective there?
Well, I think there's a great concern. We were just talking last night at the council about ways to encourage people to continue to use the internet for something that I had advocated a long time ago, is putting permitting online. So you've got a lot of these things that are already, established online, and I'm like, yeah, but you've got to understand that not everyone uses, a lot of people using their cell phones. So there's so many different ways to deal with data and access data, and I think that security is a critical element. I think, I also have worked in the healthcare field, and, with all of this focus on putting the electronic health records online, about, having access to payment programs being secure, I think there's a greater need for people to be coming in and providing security for all of that. I mean, when the city's computers go down, just like any company, I mean, business stops for a while until things can come back, because we're so used to technology. So I think that, we really have to stay on top of things.
Mm-hmm. One thing too, excuse me, is Kate, we have you from City Council, Jason from the education side at Worcester Academy. How does, if in a perfect world, here we are all on the phone right now, what are the steps, again, even for those who are listening, what are the steps that schools and city governments can take to partner on even these kinds of extracurricular things, so that there's some sort of integration? How can that happen beyond just the three of us here talking? How do we even in Worcester grow that? But how would you suggest that to someone else in another city?
Well, right now, we've got a school to career program, which is funded by the DESE, and I think that by supporting those types of things and internships, that we help support the growth and development of these types of businesses. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that's very important, that we continue to work on or that other communities can work on a jobs compact. And one of the things that, an example of how industry can help grow, no matter where you are, is when we had the Worcester Technical High School, which, by the way, I'm going to brag, is the #1 school and #1 principal in the country. And as a matter of fact, President Barack Obama is coming for graduation. But when they were building that, Harford invested $1 million into the classroom with equipment, current equipment, so that they could get the right type of technician with the skills that they needed. So basically, they were building an entryway for themselves to, for those students to get out into business. And I think that partnerships with existing businesses in education and community really need to. That's where it's a great plus, and it's an easy thing to follow.
Well, I know one of the organizations I've spoken to, of course, is National Grid, and they and several others that I've spoken to have noticed that they need to help develop the skills. So I know WPI has a program to train power engineers, basically to help grow the talent pool. And then also, too, now they've added a post-grad course for cybersecurity within the utilities. So we do see some of that. So I think that's important. And I guess to expand it, so from the both of you, and Jason, I'll start with you. One of the fears that I had, there were many as I was setting this up, because it was my first time doing it, lost a lot of sleep, literally. So I've got all my, especially, thank you to the sponsors, especially Cisco came in, and so great. We had a fully funded event, and Kate, I was talking to you. We had the room, and great. I opened up registration, and right at the beginning, I had no kids. So I realized that I was so focused on getting the sponsorships and getting, taking care of those things, that I could have this great framework without the people I was trying to reach. So, Jason, as others want to try to do something like this, kind of touching on something we talked about earlier, but how do you make sure if someone else is putting on an event like this, how are you going to get the kids there so you don't end up with a nice, Potemkin village maybe?
Right.
How do you get them there?
I think for I see it in a couple of different facets. First is it has to be attainable, approachable. So the no experience necessary, changing it from, competition to challenge, these kinds of things, I think are all ways to open the door wider. And I think that's really important, is that at this age, the net that you cast needs to be tremendous, because you just never know where you're going to get interest from. So there's that first part of it. The other part is, I think, the conversation. You and I happen to connect, and it made sense, but I think the conversation needs to be continually kind of re-sparked, because unless school administrators understand, unless city partners understand, unless, you have to have so many pieces of the puzzle lined up for success. I know this is something that I'm going to encourage other folks in Meta to participate in next year, because I think it was so important. But something that was very unique with 1NTERRUPT that I haven't seen anywhere else, and the size may have lent itself, was the flexibility, is that if we found a tangent that was working, we didn't have to course correct. That the tangents were all successful. And so I think if you put, when you have those pieces, you have the trifecta.
No, I think that.
I think that one of the best ways to
way of getting kids to the event, one, you have to make it, you have to open the door wide and cast that broad net. Two, the conversation among administrators, it has to be supported from every angle at your institution. And three, I think after year one, it's going to be people encouraging other people to be a part of this,
That's a great way to talk about what I was just about to say, is that the students themselves, I think, can be the best salespeople. The other thing I would recommend is that you don't do it during MCAS time of year. From a public school aspect, I think that's a tough time of year to try to do this, but I think the students are the best tool to sell this.
Yeah, agreed, and I think, so you all bring up really good points. So that, I've got this laundry list of lessons learned, number one being communication on this. And yeah, the timing because I think we could have had a greater turnout. For those who are not from Massachusetts on here, MCAS are standardized testing, so the schools are very concerned with those. But it was also graduations and APs, so yeah, May probably not the best time. So that's why we're doing the next one in January. And I know as a lifelong control freak, I found another lesson for me in this was letting go, realizing, because just one of the students put it to me directly. Said, "Oh, I could see so much. She was so excited about the community that could be built around this." So I've actually made her the moderator now of the Facebook page, so that I think that's one thing that I found is key, was to make sure the kids who are participating, they're not being spoken at. This is Jason. I think I mentioned to you. My approach was, these are my colleagues now. These are not kids. These are just colleagues that I'm helping to ramp up in a new endeavor. But I'm realizing how much control and influence needs to be given to them, so that they're vested in it, and they can turn around, they can point to it, and they say, "I did this. I built this." Which is why I'm still, to your point, that conversation has to continue, and that's one of the things that I'm certainly trying to do, because I want them to see that this is theirs. Maybe just provide them the environment, but like anything, I guess, that's organic, you can't force it to happen. So we're at the 4-minute mark. So what I'll do is there any just final thoughts, a minute or two, before I hand it back over to Debbie? Kate, do you have any closing thoughts, minute or two?
Well, I just think that it was an absolutely incredible opportunity, and it just falls right into that whole growth and development that we as a city have been focusing on. And we certainly want to help create the workforce of tomorrow, and provide opportunity for business growth and development to keep these young people in college here, and then when they graduate, to keep them here as well after. So we're going to be looking for more ways to help provide opportunities for them. I mean, you were telling me that 600,000, and I'm sorry, a 6-figure salary, in this industry is not unheard of for startups. So I think that's something that's exciting to sell too, for the kids.
Yeah, great. And then Jason, any closing thoughts?
For anybody that's here participating as an educator, I think have those conversations, continue to have those conversations. This is one of those hills worth fighting on, is that the more we can get our kids involved and interested and collaborating, it's going to add to success all around. This area is not going away. So we've got to really start grooming the young minds for what's going to come beyond what we're able to think.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Debbie and Chris. Debbie, I'm sorry I left you with 2 minutes, but I will turn it back over to you.
To our distinguished panelists, thank you so much for your thoughts and insights that you've shared on today's call. And to our audience, on behalf of all of us at the ICS ISAC, we appreciate your joining us today. We hope that you found the information of value and something that you can take to further develop your community's next generation cybersecurity workforce. Our next public briefing will be held Wednesday, June 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern and feature a panel of distinguished subject matter experts presenting Raising the Bar, the Status of Cybersecurity Higher Education. Other sessions will be announced in our monthly updates, on the Center's website, and in our other communication vehicles. As a reminder, a recording of this session will be available on the ICS ISAC Briefing Archive page. Thank you all again for your participation on today's call.